everyone, and welcome to another episode of my Woman Who Inspires series. We are almost to the end of these episodes in this wonderful month of March where we celebrate all the beauty of a woman. In this series, we look at our perceived negative emotions and we strive to find out what those emotions tell us. And we interview women who speak to those emotions, those experiences, and share with us how they move past it and what they found from these emotions. My name is Sreshtha Tewari. I am the director of the Self-Worth, Leadership, and Empowerment Consultancy. I am a motivational speaker, a wholeness guide, and a coach for women in leadership. Today, I am really excited to have with me one of my school friends, Dr. Marielle Maignan. Marielle is the CEO of Caribbean in Transit, which is an arts education nonprofit organization. She holds many degrees, among them a BSc in Hospitality Management and a PhD in Cultural Studies. Welcome to the series, Marielle. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to be in touch again, Sreshtha. I mean, I remember you from high school and, what wonderful memories. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited to have you. And I'm going to ask you now to share your emotional healing journey.
So thank you, Sreshtha. I had to think really long and hard about what journey I wanted to share. And I thought about sharing my journey of immigration to the US. I've actually immigrated to the US a few times. Firstly, to pursue my PhD in cultural studies in 2009. And then subsequently, I was back and forth a lot. I left in 2016, but then came back in 2018. And then following that, I got a job in the Caribbean. And so I went back to the Caribbean and then migrated back to the US in 2021. So my, life story over the last at least 10 years has been filled with movements across the seas. And the challenge in that is that every time you move, you have to reestablish your community, you have to reestablish your rituals, you have to find who you are again in that space. And that can be really, really difficult, especially if the journey that you're undertaking is not necessarily one that you wanted, right? Or that you expected or you had time to plan for. So when I went back to Trinidad in 2016, following my my degree, I didn't want to make that journey back home. I had established roots for 7 years in the US. And so going back home was, what did that mean exactly? Was it a regression? Was it a sign of failure? You're going back to live in your parents' house. I mean, there's so many emotions that come with that. And then I was in a relationship and I had just gotten married, so that it was also a separation, a physical separation from my partner. That was not exactly anticipated because I thought, okay, I could at least get a visitor's visa and go back. At that time, they denied my visitor's visa because they said that I did not have enough ties in Trinidad to give me a visitor's visa. But it didn't seem to make any sense to me. I was like, but I came back on time, so there was a deep sense of confusion. There was a sense of loss. There was a sense of, am I on track in my journey? And I'm very much about purpose and intention and, what your life journey looks like. I don't like to take up a job or do things just for money or just because I need money. It's just not how I'm built. I don't think that that's, what God has for me. So this kind of, unexpected move back to Trinidad for me was really quite heartbreaking on so many levels. And I had to figure out what to do with myself and how to rise above my own feelings of, failure in one sense. And, that self-esteem journey was one that I had to pay close attention to for a long time. And I felt as though having finished my PhD, and it's not the fact of having gotten a PhD, it's having finished, because people say of PhDs that really they just teach you how to suffer. And that is so on point. It teaches you how to be broken and how to get up from being broken. That is the process of reading for that degree. So, that whole experience of being an immigrant in your own land and then being an immigrant in a foreign land is a very complex situation. Because on one hand, coming back home should be thrilling. You're with family, you're with friends. And that is kind of, it helps to validate you. It helps to, it helps you to remember who you are and how much you're loved. And, you come back into, the bishop's community, your family community, your arts community, and everybody knows you, and that's a very different experience from when you're in the US and nobody really knows you. You have to really work hard at cultivating that community. So, I speak of like a number of things that obviously anchor me and anchor my journey. And of course, the first for me is my relationship with God. For me, that is, the core of how I'm able to move through different spaces and move through different times and be able to stay afloat and be able to find myself again. And I do a lot of writing of how I feel, writing lists, writing goals, writing aims, writing letters to myself, to God, to my future self. So that's one of the techniques that I use oftentimes. But really, I have a whole menu or whole toolkit of strategies that have helped to anchor me over time in terms of moving through different spaces and moving through different communities and different, phases of my journey. And I speak about that a lot in the coaching that I do for creative entrepreneurs. One of the kind of systems that I do is I create a timeline of achievements of all the challenging spaces and times that I have experienced and really start to map how I've come out of each. And that's important to me because clearly my journey is filled with, so much kind of change. But I also hold on to objects in a certain way and rituals, right? Objects, rituals, and sayings, I would say. And I would share a couple of these with you now. One of the objects that I hold on to is a card from, it was just like a speaking engagement that I was invited to when I did a course with a program in the US called Empowered Women International. It's a fantastic program just for, kind of what you're talking about here, for immigrant women who are in the arts and who are seeking ways to empower themselves and build their businesses. And so I went to speak at this woman's event with Clearinghouse for Women. That was the name of the entity. And they gave me this card to say thank you. And it said, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you've imagined. And I put the card in a frame. It's a little square card. And no matter where I was going or how long I was going for, I traveled with it, or it traveled with me to remind me that no matter where I was, what I was doing was the same. I was going confidently in the direction of my dreams. And another thing that kind of accompanies that is that wherever I landed, I was to bloom where I was planted. So those are two of the things. So that has to do with the objects and the sayings, right? And then there was one ritual that really, moved with me as well. And this has to do with the way in which, my life became so transient, or the spaces became so transient. And so this was one ritual that I was almost guaranteed I could find and do in any space. And as simple and silly as it sounds, it was a cup of coffee. And funnily enough, when I went to study in the US, I swore to myself that I was not going to pick up this habit of coffee because my mother was really addicted to coffee for a period of her life. And she made me swear, do not take up this coffee habit. It is unhealthy. So I said, fine. But by about the fourth year in, I was like, oh no, coffee is my friend. Coffee is my friend. I am so sorry, but coffee is my friend. I need it. So not, not the most healthy thing and not one I would encourage. It could be, I would definitely encourage you to pick up maybe a cup of tea instead. But I think the whole point of that story is that I moved multiple times from country to country, and coffee became my ritual in familiar and unfamiliar spaces. And so it traveled with me like that card. And I'm always able to have a cup of coffee with myself and say my prayers, sit down and talk to myself about where I am and where I'm going. And I have a cup of coffee and I commune with God. And I have a conversation with him in terms of where does he want me to go? And what is this juncture in my life about? And I can also have a cup of coffee with a friend and ask them, where are you on your life's journey and what's the next step for you? And so coffee encourages that sense of community, or it can build, or it can facilitate, I should say, that community, because you can use it as that kind of vehicle. And again, this is not about the cup of coffee itself. It's, it could be a cup of tea, it could be a glass of juice. It doesn't really matter. It's just about the rituals that help to stabilize and anchor you when everything around you is moving. And I mean, the immigrant faces all kinds of challenges, not only reestablishing community in every space that they are, but for me, my identity is also kind of built up and, reinforced by the things that are around me, right? Because I'm very much an artist in that touch points, like physical touch points, are really important to me, and they help to ground me. So my books are so, like when my books are not around, I literally tear up, it's like, oh no, how am I going to function in this space? Or when my art groups are not around, they help me to remember who I am, the times that have passed and what have been in those different spaces, and that I can be that again and more. So, I think what I'm trying to say here is that there are several things that have helped me overcome the challenges, and particularly overcome this challenge of immigration in my life. I think it's, for me, really centered around God. And I think, to some extent, having a cup of coffee creates a ritual that allows me to commune with God. I think that I'm also really focused and serious about establishing community in terms of creative community and church community. So all of those things, there are a lot of C's. And I believe in really writing these things down, because I think that writing helps to center you, to center your thoughts, to kind of create a pause for you to reflect. And it helps me to map out all of these processes, the objects, the rituals, the sayings that I need in my space. And so I keep these things as physical reminders. So I have one on my desk right here, right? That's really a critical one as well. It says, vision to see obstacles as opportunities. And I think that's so important in every battle that you face, right? And I think it's the kind of, it really is the challenge of every entrepreneur to see the obstacle as an opportunity. And how do you turn it around, and how do you re-narrativize? And so that process of writing also helps you to re-narrativize, right? And I mean, these rituals and, this kind of construct is really different for everyone. But I really encourage people to figure out what that construct is for them. What are those bridges for them? And that's what I do through my coaching programs as well. I help people to figure out, okay, what are the things that trigger me positively and what are the things that trigger me negatively? And how do I create a physical environment that triggers me positively? and, lessen the negative triggers. How do I also create, that's in the physical domain. How do I also create that community and that network that are positive triggers? So I want to sum it up for you, because I've spoken all over the place and I tend to be that kind of scattered thinker, but I do have a lot of structure. So to counter the confusion that I felt from immigration, to counter the feelings of career displacement, the isolation that often comes with immigration, the culture shock. Every time you enter a new space, even though you're familiar with the space, there's still this element of culture shock in terms of how the country has moved or not moved. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of emotional displacement. And, you have to kind of cognitively cope with all of these emotions that are swirling, right? And so I look at it as 4 C's in terms of what I do to cope. And that is that I try to create the environment that is healthy for me. And that has to do with the objects that surround me, the rituals that I have, the sayings, the writing. So that's creating the environment. And then the second C is creative family, because for me, that's paramount to who I am. And so when that's missing, there's definitively something missing from me. This should be first, but Christianity and finding that church family. And then finally, for me, especially when I immigrate to the US, it's finding that Caribbean connection. Because, you can be in the space with Christian family, you can be in the space with creative family, but there's nobody who's from your country. And you feel this sense of, something's missing, I just last night introduced my family to some corn soups. I made some corn soups and they're like, oh, okay, this tastes good. But there's nobody saying, well, God, yes, some good corn soup. That is missing, like that resonance of like, oh my God, yes. So that Caribbean connection, I think, is really, really important. Mind you, my husband is Haitian American, but his kids are very American. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of my coping mechanisms.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story, Marielle, and I'm so grateful for you for sharing it, starting with the whole immigration process and being back and forth. And I like that you spoke about how you felt when you had to come back home, which is a very real feeling for a lot of persons in many different situations, be it you went to school and you have to come back home, or maybe you're married and the marriage didn't work out and you have to go back home, and really coping with that sense of failure, which you haven't failed, but it's just feeling that you're regressing when you're actually not, and it's how the brain works. But I like how you spoke about how you try to rise above it so much. You are pure survivor, because everything you talk about is just dealing with what comes your way in a most positive way, and speaking about so many things, including your relationship with God and setting your rituals. I love the ritual with the coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but it speaks to identifying with something that gives you comfort and using that comfort to traverse different areas of your life, whether it is when you sit in prayer, whether it is in your relationships, whether it is just time for yourself to figure out how to go about confidently into the world of your dreams, as you spoke about. And again, I love that you spoke about what we say are scripts in one of the courses I teach, those scripts that really affirm to us all the beauty in the world, that we are confident and that we can really achieve anything that we want once we keep reaffirming and believing. And I love your summary on your 3 C's. You also have a model for your survival and how you went through all of your emotions, the creating an environment, creating a family, Christianity, and of course, that Caribbean connection. And this is something too that I don't think we realize and we value, how we relate to our own people, and that someone can tell you something from away and it's positive and it's nice, but it's not like when you hear someone in a Trinidadian accent say, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing ever. It's such a difference, and it speaks to our human connection as well, and how well we relate. Sometimes when we're feeling down, all we need to hear is somebody with our own accent talking to us, and the value of us as a Caribbean people, knowing and loving our culture, being vested in our culture, and using that to connect wherever we go in the world. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I want to ask you, I mean, I know you spoke a lot about it, but are you grateful for those experiences? And if yes, why?
I'm grateful for these experiences because it teaches me that wherever I am planted, I really can bloom. And that, it teaches me to make the best of my circumstance. And really, it helps me to identify and empathize with those who are hit with circumstances that are unexpected, that are unwanted, that are not their fault, in so many different ways. I mean, I've come into contact with persons who are suicidal, for example, and it's not something that is my personal experience, but when you listen to their story and you recognize how they've been hit with circumstances that were not their fault or that they had no control over, I know that feeling, And so, the process of immigration and being isolated and having to kind of redefine yourself in every space really helps you to be a more open and empathetic person. And you just find yourself identifying with all those who are othered in various ways. And I have found that to be a very, very powerful lesson in humanity.
Yeah, there's so much intelligence in your learnings and how you apply it to different people. I really want to honor you for that. And I want to ask you one more question. What would you tell your younger self? I know you have a little baby. What would you tell your younger self?
I would say to her, dance like no one is watching. Dance is one of my things, like you. And, I think it's one of those things that's really freeing and it really helps you to connect with your deeper self in any moment, in any space, in any context. And it's one of the things that grounds me. And it's one of the things that I really want for her. Yeah. Whether she becomes a professional one or not, no one's watching.
That is so beautiful. And it's something if you know me, I completely agree and identify with that. Dance like no one is watching. Just be you in that moment. Be free to be you and who you are, because all of us are unique and there's no one else like you. So there's absolutely no shame in who you are. So Marielle, I really want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for coming on the series and sharing such immense wisdom and intelligence in terms of your journeys, your learnings, and your own model on how to survive and go through life, knowing that it is not just survival, it is the beauty of every moment, it's the purpose of living, and just being free to be who you are. You truly epitomize everything I'm trying to teach to other women in my life so that they enjoy their journey. And I'm grateful for your affirmations in this space. But to my audience, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again tomorrow. This is Sreshtha Tewari for the Woman Who Inspires series. Bye.